Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It is great to be here.
Today we are taking on something massive. A deep dive into the very bedrock of how large military organizations are designed to fight and ultimately to win. We're focused squarely on the foundational principles of division operations and tactical command. We're talking about the strategic context, the cognitive frameworks, and the precise operational mechanisms needed for success in large-scale combat.
That's a great way to put it. We are dissecting the blueprints. For anyone who's a serious student of military science, the division is arguably the most complex and critical echelon.
Why is that? What makes it so pivotal?
Well, it sits at this crucial inflection point. On one hand, it has to execute the operational plan that's set by the corps above it. But on the other, it's responsible for the immediate, violent, and incredibly detailed synchronization of its brigade combat teams.
So that's the close combat.
That's the close combat. It truly is where policy meets the pavement.
And to guide us through this intricate architecture, we've really anchored ourselves in the definitive sources. We're drawing our insights today primarily from Field Manual 3.0 Operations, Field Manual 394 Armies, Corps, and Division Operations, and of course Field Manual 6.0 Commander and Staff Organization and Operations.
Yeah, and those three field manuals are so important because they provide the common frame of reference. They ensure that across the entire force, everyone is speaking the same language, about objectives, about planning, about execution.
Common vocabulary.
Exactly. Our mission today is to go beyond the definitions and really get at the implications of this doctrine. What does it all mean for a commander trying to win a protracted fight against a peer adversary?
Okay, let's unpack this. It feels like we need to start with the big picture. The huge operational distance between a national policy objective and a single soldier on the ground.
And how the division is uniquely positioned to bridge that exact gap. To really understand the division, we have to first clearly define the three conceptual levels of warfare. You've got the strategic, the operational, and the tactical. This separation, which is outlined very clearly in Field Manual 3.0, it's not just academic. It helps commanders and their staff organize their thinking and, crucially, allocate resources in the right way.
I think most people have a handle on the strategic level, right? That's the highest realm. It deals with national security policy, setting goals, mobilizing the whole nation's resources to achieve political aims. It's the why we're fighting.
Sure.
And the tactical level also seems pretty intuitive. That's the lowest level, where you have platoons, companies, battalions. They're planning and executing engagements to achieve immediate success in a specific battle.
Exactly. It's the operational level of warfare that often proves the most difficult to conceptualize and to master.
The one in the middle?
The one in the middle. It's situated right between the strategic and tactical, and it is the realm of the division and the corps. This is where campaigns and major operations are conceived, planned, conducted, and sustained.
So it's the bridge.
It is the essential bridge. The critical insight here is that the operational level links the detailed, often chaotic, tactical employment of forces to the achievement of those higher policy goals.
So if you don't have a strong operational design, a brilliant campaign that's built at the division or corps level, all your tactical victories, they risk becoming just disconnected, unfocused actions.
They
don't contribute meaningfully to winning the war.
That's it, exactly. It's the difference between winning a skirmish and winning the campaign. The operational design ensures every maneuver, every fire mission, every single logistical push is pointed toward achieving that higher strategic outcome.
It prevents just wasting effort.
It prevents the exhaustive waste of effort. And it also forces the strategic level to stay, tethered to reality. If the tactical outcomes are bad, the operational command has to send that message up the chain. And that might even require a shift in the strategic objectives themselves.
Before we zoom in on the division itself, we probably need to talk about the environment we're in now, which is governed by the competition continuum. Conflict isn't just an on-off switch anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's a dynamic, constantly shifting landscape. The continuum outlines three main zones: competition below armed conflict, crisis, and armed conflict.
And we shouldn't think of these as clean phases.
No, you have to treat them as overlapping states. Competition below armed conflict is that constant state we're in now, where nation-states are always using all elements of national power, diplomatic, informational, economic lucre to gain an advantage without actually resorting to sustained lethal force.
This zone seems critically important today because it's where information warfare and cyberspace operations just thrive. Adversaries are actively using digital means to disrupt infrastructure, steal intellectual property, and maybe most importantly, create internal divisions and sow distrust within opposing nations.
They're trying to undermine the coherence of an opponent's decision-making process before a single shot is even fired.
And that sustained shaping effort leads right into the crisis phase.
It does. A crisis is an emerging incident, a potential threat that develops rapidly. And when that crisis flares up, Army forces are vital. They provide flexible deterrent options and flexible response options.
So just by deploying, their posture signals a very clear willingness to escalate and prevail if that deterrence fails.
It's an unambiguous signal, and what the source material points out is that during this crisis phase, a peer threat dramatically intensifies its shaping efforts. They don't wait for the fighting to start.
They use what the doctrine calls preclusion.
Yes, preclusion. They use information warfare, diplomatic pressure, to complicate an opponent's decision-making process. They often try to force you to choose between two, unpalatable courses of action. They're trying to create conditions they can exploit later with minimal interference.
But the ultimate focus of all this doctrine, and where the division is really the central actor, is prevailing in large-scale combat operations.
That's the most intense, destructive, and casualty-heavy environment. It is the absolute core mission of the Corps and divisions to conduct this type of combat. The focus is on the large-scale defeat and destruction of enemy ground forces as part of a unified joint effort.
Okay, so if large-scale combat is the environment and the division is the central formation, what is its specific non-transferable role? How does it differ from the echelons above and below it?
We can really define the roles by the scope of their targeting and their maneuver. So way up at the top, the Land Component Command, often focused on an entire theater, is trying to defeat long and mid-range enemy fires and set up operational level sustainment.
Then the Corps comes in, is the senior Army tactical echelon.
Right. And the Corps concentrates on degrading enemy long-range fires. We're talking deep missile systems, long-range rockets. They maintain the operational tempo, manage the logistics flow, and set the broad maneuver conditions for the divisions underneath them. They're fighting the enemy's operational reserves and their command infrastructure.
The division then steps in with a more focused, but, wow, no less challenging, mandate.
The division's job is to defeat enemy mid-range fires, to mass combat effects onto enemy forward echelons, and, most crucially, to synchronize the maneuver of its brigade combat teams in close combat. The division is the master integrator of multi-domain capabilities right on the immediate battlefield.
And then below them, the brigade combat teams are doing the immediate fighting, the close face-to-face stuff that actually destroys the enemy.
That's it. And that distinction really highlights the division's unique pressure point. The Corps is focused on the deep fight, essentially protecting the division from strategic interference.
While the brigade combat teams are focused on the immediate fight.
And the division is the one echelon that has to look both ways at the same time. It's coordinating joint airstrikes deep in the enemy's rear, while also micromanaging the synchronization of 3 or 4 of its own brigade combat teams, all while securing its own rear area. It's an incredible balancing act.
And this just underscores the crucial dependency of the lower echelons on the higher ones, doesn't it?
Completely. Higher echelons Corps, theater command, joint forces, they retain control of the SCARET's high-demand capabilities. We're talking joint air support, space surveillance, specialized cyberspace assets, long-range strike platforms.
So they use these to set the conditions.
They employ these capabilities strategically to set conditions, to achieve air superiority, jam enemy communications, eliminate a critical logistics hub, things that the division can then exploit with its maneuver. Without that top-down enablement, the division's brigade combat teams are basically fighting with one hand tied behind their back.
So a division's success is not just a function of its own combat skill, but of the effectiveness of the entire joint force setting the stage for them.
It's an interdependent system.
Okay, so we've moved past the structural roles. Now we get into the realm of how a commander actually thinks about connecting those strategic goals to tactical execution. This cognitive leap, I believe, is known as operational art.
That's right.
Operational art sounds a little mysterious, but Field Manual 394 defines it as a very precise cognitive approach. It's the application of skill, knowledge, experience, creativity, and judgment.
Mm-hmm. And you use all of that to integrate your objectives, your methods, your resources, and your risk. It's the commander's way of thinking through the entire fight before it even begins.
So it's the methodology for achieving strategic goals through military means. You mentioned 4 interconnected elements: ends, ways, means, and risk.
Yes. The ends are your desired objectives, what you have to accomplish. The means are your resources, the division's troops, supplies, capabilities. The ways are your methods, the course of action, the campaign design.
And risk is the constant assessment of the probability that your ways and means will fail to achieve the ends. Or, I suppose, that the cost will just be too high.
It's a dynamic balancing act. And the result of applying this operational art is what we call the operational approach, the detailed framework for a campaign that ensures unity of effort across the entire organization.
The beauty of studying this is seeing how operational art can set the stage for success far from the immediate battlefield. I know Field Manual 394 gives an excellent historical example about the 6th Army during the Philippines campaign in World War II.
It's a fantastic vignette.
That campaign is fascinating because the decisive battle didn't happen first, did it? The operational art was really in the prep work.
Precisely. The main goal was liberating Luzon, the main island. It was defended by over 250,000 Japanese troops, a huge task, but the operational approach dictated a very different starting point.
They went to Leyte first.
They established a crucial logistics and staging base on Leyte, hundreds of miles away. Leyte itself wasn't the decisive objective, not in terms of destroying the enemy, but it was the necessary base that expanded the operational reach of the 6th Army. It provided secure logistics, and it supported the eventual massive amphibious landing on Luzon.
So operational art is about understanding that you often need these intermediate steps to unlock future options.
It's about setting the stage, not just playing the final scene.
And you can't design a successful campaign without a profound grasp of the environment, which leads us to understanding the operational environment.
Right. The operational environment is the collection of all the conditions, circumstances, and influences that affect the employment of your capabilities and bear on the commander's decisions. And it's so much more than just the terrain.
For Army forces, this understanding is filtered across 5 domains, right? Land, maritime, air, space, and cyberspace.
Correct. But it's also viewed through 3 crucial dimensions: the physical, the information, and the human.
The domains are the physical or technical spaces. But those dimensions, that's where the true complexity of modern war really lies. Tell us more about how they interact.
Well, war, at its most fundamental level, is an active force in the physical dimension. Tanks moving, rockets firing.
Right.
But the purpose of that force is to compel a change in the decision-making and the behavior of the enemy forces and their populations. And that is the human dimension.
And the information dimension is the connective tissue between them, isn't it?
Yeah.
As Field Manual 30 notes, this dimension involves content, data, communication pathways, everything from a satellite transmission to a social media post.
It is the critical factor in peer conflict. We strive for something called information advantage. That's the condition where your force holds the initiative in situational understanding, in decision-making, and in influencing relevant actors' behavior more effectively than the enemy.
It's not just about having more computers.
Not at all. It's about converting raw information into decision-quality knowledge faster than your opponent, and protecting your own data streams while you do it. Think about it. If the enemy is fighting based on intelligence that's 12 hours old, and your forces are operating on intelligence that is 12 minutes old, that discrepancy alone creates a significant tactical and operational advantage.
This depth of understanding brings us directly to what might be the most critical requirement for any division command team: achieving shared understanding and implementing mission command.
Yes.
Given all the complexity we just described, how does a commander make sure everyone is on the same page?
Shared understanding of the operational environment, of the commander's intent, and the purpose of the mission. That is the absolute foundation for unity of effort. Without it, the decentralized execution you need in a contested environment will fail.
And that's where mission command comes in.
Yes. Field Manual 60 defines mission command as the Army's philosophy of command and control. It emphasizes empowering subordinate decision-making and decentralized execution.
In a world where the enemy is actively jamming your GPS, striking your headquarters, targeting your communication nodes, you just can't rely on centralized control, can you?
Yeah.
A division commander can't possibly approve every fire mission or every movement order.
That's why disciplined initiative is the ultimate test of mission command. It requires commanders and their subordinates to accept calculated risk and act decisively based on the overall intent, even when communication is lost or when outcomes are uncertain. And that relies entirely on a climate of trust that's established well before any operations begin.
And this trust has to be deep. I remember the sources emphasizing that for this to work, A brigade combat team commander has to understand the intent not just of their division commander, but often the corps commander's intent 2 echelons up. Why is that level of understanding so vital?
Well, if the brigade commander only understands their immediate task, they might execute it perfectly, but in a way that creates a dilemma or an unanticipated vulnerability for the division 2 days later, or for an adjacent division. But by understanding the corps commander's strategic purpose, for instance, why they are allocating a certain scarce asset like a deep surveillance drone, the brigade commander can prioritize their own actions and resource use to directly contribute to that larger theater-level objective. It shifts their decision-making from what is my next task to what must I accomplish to achieve the 2 echelon objective.
So we've covered the cognitive approach, operational art, mission command. Now let's talk about translating all that planning into physical results. This is about generating combat power.
Right. And Field Manual 3.0 defines combat power very simply. It's the total means of destructive and disruptive force that a military unit can apply against an enemy at a given time.
And this force isn't just calculated by adding up the number of tanks and artillery tubes you have.
No, it's a much more complex formula. It's driven by the synchronization of 5 mutually complementary dynamics that, when you combine them, yield a powerful blow designed to overwhelm and paralyze the enemy.
Let's delve into those 5 dynamics. And we have to start, it seems, with leadership.
Leadership is identified as the most essential dynamic. It's the multiplying and unifying factor of combat power. A well-led unit, even if it's materially inferior, will often outperform a poorly led, technologically superior unit. It provides purpose, direction, motivation. It's the primary driver behind effective command and control.
That seems obvious, but doctrinally, naming it the most essential dynamic really underscores that tanks and tech are secondary to human motivation and cohesion.
Absolutely. The second dynamic is information, which we've touched on. This is the source of your qualitative advantage, the ability to act on the situation more quickly and effectively than the enemy. The fight for information is continuous,
So division staffs are constantly trying to gain information through reconnaissance and surveillance.
while at the same time protecting their own data, communications, and command locations through robust counterintelligence and operations security. If you don't fight for information, the other 4 dynamics are just. They're applied blind.
Then we get into the physical triad: firepower, mobility, and survivability. These are the traditional components of battlefield capability.
They are. Firepower is your capacity to destroy, achieved through direct and indirect fire systems, and it's increasingly augmented by joint and long-range Army missile and rocket fires. Mobility is your ability to move a force to a position of relative advantage over the enemy. It allows for surprise, concentration of forces, and rapid exploitation.
And survivability. This is often mistakenly thought of as just armor plating, but the doctrine makes it clear it's much more comprehensive. It's the ability of a force to withstand enemy effects while staying mission capable.
It demands proactive measures, especially in an environment with sophisticated peer threats. Field Manual 3.0 is specific. Survivability includes operations security, dispersion, deception, and minimizing your friendly electromagnetic signatures.
So it's about minimizing the target the enemy can detect, track, and hit.
The goal isn't just to absorb a hit. The goal is to avoid being hit in the first place or to make the enemy's targeting data irrelevant.
And when you synchronize these 5 dynamics, leadership, firepower, information, mobility, and survivability, you're aiming for the ultimate doctrinal outcome, which is convergence.
Convergence. It's the concerted employment of capabilities against decisive points in any domain, land, air, cyber, space, to create complementary effects against an enemy, system, formation, or decision maker.
It's like a perfectly timed combination punch.
That's a great analogy. Since peer threats are deep, resilient, and multi-layered, success requires sustaining attacks across multiple domains over time to create these fleeting windows of opportunity.
Why is convergence primarily a top-down driven outcome from the division and corps? Why can't a brigade just converge its own forces?
Because convergence requires the integration of those scarce joint and Army capabilities we mentioned earlier. Long-range missiles, Sabre teams, joint air support. The division and corps have the best understanding of the larger operational framework and the authority to task those high-level assets to hit targets in the deep area that will enable the close fight. A brigade it lacks the scope and the access to pull those capabilities together all at once.
And the commander is looking for different types of effects. The doctrine talks about enduring, sequential, and simultaneous effects.
Yes. Enduring effects, like the permanent destruction of a key logistics hub, sustain your advantage. Sequential effects, like destroying one reserve force than another, create successive dilemmas for the enemy. But the most paralyzing is the simultaneous effect.
Attacking across multiple domains at once.
Exactly. Hit their command posts with fires, disable their communications via cyber, and use disinformation to confuse their reserves, all within the same 30-minute window. That sudden, multidimensional shock can paralyze enemy decision-making and open the door for immediate maneuver exploitation.
There's a perfect historical example of this, creating paralysis through deception, leading to a simultaneous advantage, Operation Postern in New Guinea during World War II. It's highlighted in Field Manual 3.0.
It's a textbook case of leveraging the information and human dimensions to achieve physical superiority. The ultimate objective was seizing the critical port and airfield complex at Leh. However, the Allies recognized that the Japanese 18th Army commander had significant forces in the area.
So instead of a direct assault on Leh, the Allies used deception.
They launched Operation Postern by conducting concentrated air, naval, and ground attacks on Salamaua, which was about 30 miles southwest of Leh.
And the Japanese commander bought it.
He was convinced Salamaua was the main objective, so he committed the bulk of his 51st Division to reinforce those defenses. This was an effect created purely in the information and human dimensions, just the perception of a threat. By convincing the enemy to reinforce the wrong place, the Allies effectively tied up the vast majority of enemy ground forces at a deceptive objective.
Which created an overwhelming physical and informational advantage for the main effort. When the Allies finally struck Leh, they faced dramatically reduced resistance.
They seized the objective quickly, which then became a major operational base for exploiting the rest of the campaign. The success wasn't owed to better guns, it was owed to a superior operational approach that successfully manipulated the enemy commander's assumptions.
Okay, so the convergence of capabilities we just discussed. I mean, the ability to think 2 weeks ahead while executing this hour's fire plan. That demands a highly structured and resilient headquarters, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, which pivots us to the nuts and bolts of how a division commander executes this complex doctrine through their command and control structure, which is detailed in Field Manual 6.0.
The scale of the division requires immense redundancy and specialized focus. A division headquarters isn't just one location. They typically employ 4 types of command posts.
That's right. You have a main command post, a tactical command post, a rear command post, and a mobile command group.
Let's start with the main command post, the hub.
The main command post is the primary, robust hub for continuous operations. Its functions are comprehensive. It controls current operations, it performs detailed analysis and planning for future operations, developing branches and sequels, and critically, it synchronizes the division's entire targeting process. It also conducts the formal assessment of operational progress.
But the size and the electronic signature of that main command post, that makes it a huge target for peer threats, which is why the tactical command post exists.
That's exactly right. The tactical command post, or TAC, is smaller, more mobile, and it's designed to relocate frequently to complicate the enemy's targeting. Its primary role is to give the commander or a deputy commander forward situational awareness and immediate control of the most critical elements of the close fight.
So it lets the commander influence the decisive action without being tied to the main headquarters.
Right.
Now, I want to spend a little time on the rear command post, because the doctrine really emphasizes that the rear is no longer a safe area in large-scale combat.
It's a critical point. The rear command post is dedicated entirely to command and control oversight for the division support area. Its focus is on protection and enabling functions. Terrain management, movement control of convoys, defeating threats in the rear, whether it's enemy special forces or long-range fires, and managing sustainment.
And it's often commanded by a deputy commanding general.
Yes, which recognizes that the constant threat to your logistical lines means that rear area security is an operational function, not just a logistical one. It protects the engine that powers the front line.
And finally, the mobile command group, the ultimate forward presence tool for the commander.
The Mobile Command Group, or MCG, consists of the commander and a highly selected, specialized staff, typically the indispensable people from maneuver, fires, and intelligence. Its makeup is fluid, dictated entirely by the mission, and allows the commander to maintain influence and awareness when they're separated from the other command posts. It's essential for leadership presence at the point of friction.
The staff organization within these posts has to manage operations across wildly different timescales. Field Manual 6.0 says divisions are resourced for 3 integrating cells to handle these diverse planning horizons.
And that structural separation is vital. It is the only way to avoid what we call current operations syndrome, where the entire staff just gets consumed by the immediate crisis. These three cells ensure that anticipatory planning is continuous.
Okay, so the plan cell is the long-range horizon. They're looking months to weeks out.
Right. They're developing the initial operation plan in order and planning for follow-on phases or sequels. They're basically thinking, if we succeed, how do we exploit it? If we fail, how do we recover?
Then you have the future operations cell. That's the mid-range cell, focused on weeks to days.
Their task is dynamic refinement. They take the plan cell's work and they modify current orders based on how the situation is actually unfolding. They assess mid-range progress, they develop critical branch plans for potential enemy actions, and they ask the crucial question, what if the enemy does X? How do we rapidly pivot?
And the current operations cell is the engine room, short range, days to hours.
That's the execution cell. They're executing the current order, monitoring and controlling maneuver forces, issuing immediate fragmentary orders, and ensuring all resources are where they need to be. Their focus is purely on what is the reality on the ground right now.
Tying all these complex, geographically separated headquarters elements together must require extraordinary liaison and coordination.
It does. Liaison is the contact that's maintained between forces and agencies to ensure mutual understanding and unity of purpose. Liaison teams provide commanders with vital, nuanced information that digital systems alone just can't convey, the tone of a conversation, the true capacity of an allied unit, things like that.
And there's a specialized asset for this modern joint multinational fight, the digital liaison detachment.
The Digital Liaison Detachment is a specialized technical team with expertise spanning intelligence, operations, fire support, logistics. Crucially, they have the interoperable equipment needed to bridge the command and control architectures of multinational or joint partners. They are the human and the technological link that ensures information flows seamlessly across boundaries.
Which brings us to the battle rhythm, the mechanism that synchronizes all these disparate planning cells and headquarters.
The battle rhythm is the deliberate, predictable daily cycle of command and control activities, meetings, working groups, briefings, decision points. The chief of staff is the orchestrator, ensuring that the outputs of one activity directly inform the inputs of the next. It imposes order on chaos.
Can you give us a clear, practical example of that necessary sequencing within the battle rhythm?
Sure, take the targeting cycle. It's a continuous process, but the working groups have to follow a specific sequence. The information operations working group, for instance, must happen before the targeting working group.
Why is that?
Because the information operations officer will plan effects aimed at influencing enemy perception, identifying what information needs to be broadcast or what enemy data needs to be corrupted. Those effects and targets, whether they're physical or informational, must then be passed immediately to the targeting working group,
Where the staff then does the detailed work, checking resources, ensuring fire support is available, legal compliance, timing the attack.
Exactly. If those two working groups happened in isolation, you might launch a physical strike against an enemy command post 5 hours before the cyber team disables their communication relay. You would reduce the paralyzing, simultaneous effect of convergence. The battle rhythm ensures the staff is thinking sequentially and simultaneously, maximizing the effect of every single resource.
Okay, so we've established the doctrine and the structure. Now let's use that framework to talk about how the division actually fights. And that's often organized geographically around the deep, close, and rear areas.
This framework divides the division's area of operations into distinct spaces based on where effects are focused. And the close area is the absolute core of the division's primary effort.
That's where the brigade combat teams are doing the majority of close combat, achieving the physical defeat of enemy ground forces. It's the highest risk, highest friction zone.
It is. The deep area, conversely, is where the corps or higher echelons typically focus their main effort. For the division, their deep area operations are crucial for shaping that close fight. They integrate special operations forces, long-range army fires, and joint capabilities to degrade the enemy's will, destroy high-payoff targets like artillery or reserves, and disrupt their defensive and logistical infrastructure, all before those enemy forces ever reach the close fight.
So the division's deep fight isn't about decisive destruction, but about decisive shaping, making the close fight easier for the brigade combat teams.
Precisely. If they can eliminate 30% of the enemy's supporting artillery in the deep area, the brigade combat teams in the close area face 30% less risk and can maneuver more aggressively.
And the rear area, or support area, is devoted to sustaining the entire force.
The support area is where your sustainment assets, fuel, ammunition, medical facilities are positioned and protected. It secures the vital lines of communications. However, Field Manual 3.0 is very clear. Rear operations are continuously targeted by enemy deep operations. This requires units to defend themselves through a combination of passive measures like camouflage and dispersion, and active measures like dedicated air defense and ground security patrols.
So in large-scale combat, if the division can't secure its rear, the front will eventually collapse.
Inevitably.
Let's discuss the context of offensive and defensive operations within this framework, starting with the offense. Field Manual 3.0 defines 4 types.
Yes, we have movement to contact, attack, exploitation, and pursuit. Success in the offense hinges on achieving advantages in multiple domains, and it's often reliant on deception and surprise to break the enemy's balance. The offensive aims to reach all your desired objectives before you reach culmination.
And culmination is that point where the force just runs out of steam, resources, or political support, and can't continue the attack without a pause.
That's the great fear of the commander. Knowing when to transition from offense to defense or pause for sustainment to avoid catastrophic failure. It relies on superb situational assessment.
On the defensive operations side, the purpose is to defeat an enemy attack, gain time, and develop conditions favorable for returning to the offense. The key to a successful defense seems to be breaking the enemy's momentum. How do you achieve surprise in the defense when the enemy knows you're there defending?
Surprise in the defense is achieved by avoiding predictable dispositions and techniques. This means actively masking the true strength of a position, using deception to funnel the enemy into pre-planned kill zones, and, most importantly, orchestrating combat power from all domains to synchronize effects at a decisive place and time.
So you might let them think they've achieved a breakthrough.
Exactly. Only to unleash a devastating counterattack supported by massed artillery, joint air, and cyber disruption precisely when they are most vulnerable. The enemy has to be confused about where the decisive point of the defense truly lies.
And across this entire continuum, from competition to large-scale combat, there's the continuous imperative, consolidating gains. This isn't a phase that comes after the fight, is it?
No, and this is a crucial doctrinal shift. The doctrine views it as an integral, continuous part of all operations. Consolidating gains is how a commander ensures that temporary tactical success is locked in and made enduring.
Initially, the focus is tactical.
Yes, exploiting immediate success to ensure that defeated enemy forces can't reconstitute resistance in the area you've just seized. This is done by securing key terrain, establishing security checkpoints, collecting prisoners and materials.
But the long-term goal is strategic. It's about establishing the conditions for a sustainable security environment and eventually transitioning control to legitimate authorities.
And this requires continuous coordination with diplomatic, humanitarian, and security force assistance organizations. If a division defeats the enemy but fails to transition governance, the defeated forces will simply reconstitute as an insurgency, turning a military victory into a strategic failure. It is the final, essential step where military success is translated into lasting political outcomes.
Wow. So we have covered the entire spectrum. From the strategic objectives to the cognitive art required to design the campaign, the highly structured command and control apparatus, and the operational framework for execution in the deep, close, and rear.
And the doctrine we've explored today across Field Manual 394, Field Manual 3.0, and Field Manual 6.0, it really shows the division's unique, high-stakes position as that critical link. It integrates multi-domain capabilities, from space assets to ground maneuver to mass effects on the enemy's forward echelons.
And it demands an extraordinarily resilient and highly structured staff, capable of that decentralized execution. The sheer complexity means that relying on centralized control is it's a path to failure.
It absolutely is. The foundation of successful division operations really hinges on 2 critical interwoven concepts. First, achieving shared understanding across that complex multi-domain operational environment through continuous intelligence flow and effective liaison.
And second,
Implementing mission command through disciplined, decentralized execution, which is only possible because of that agile headquarters organization and the non-negotiable adherence to the battle rhythm we detail.
without that shared understanding and the trust it breeds, mission command just devolves into disorganized chaos.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider, based on the material we've covered. We noted in Field Manual 3.0 that continuous operations rapidly degrade the performance of soldiers and equipment. And it stresses that units are often more likely to fail catastrophically than gradually.
Right. So given the overwhelming operational complexity, the psychological demands of sustained combat and contested deployments, and the fact that a division may need to fight for weeks or months on end, what is the single most critical non-material component? So not firepower, not mobility, not even intelligence data, that a division commander must proactively preserve to ensure that endurance and prevent that catastrophic failure.
Think about what provides the tenacity, the cohesion, and the aggressiveness necessary for prolonged combat, even when you're materially depleted. It relates back to that multiplying factor we identified in generating combat power. We'll leave you with that question to mull over.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the demanding world of division operations and tactical command. We'll see you next time.